I've had a lot of people encourage me to do a blog video on mastering, so that's what I'm going to do today. If you're wondering what the difference between mixing and mastering is, there's actually a slight difference, well, quite a big difference actually. Mastering is concerned with only the left and right master file. Mixing's to do with obviously all your individual channel strip files, so that could be kick, hats, snares, overheads, keys, bass, basically everything that makes up your track. But like I said, mastering is only concerned with the mixer's bounce, the stereo file at the very end. For Hillsong stuff, we actually have two separate guys. One guy does our mastering and one guy does our mixing, because they're actually completely different jobs and require unique skills. So that's what we do. I'm just going to show you a piece of music that I wrote for a Hillsong Chapel album DVD menu music. This was done quite a few years ago, but I had to do a master of it recently, so I'm just going to walk you through exactly what I did, why I did it, and see if I can give you a few tips to add to your mastering trick bag. I'm not the best master engineer in the world. Obviously I've still got a lot to learn, like we all do, but hopefully you can pick up maybe one or two tricks that I'm going to give you today to help in your mastering process. So first of all, I'm just going to play this track through from top to bottom and hear what it sounded before I mastered it. So here we go. Okay, I'm just going to do the same thing, play it from top to bottom, but now with all my effects plugins on. So the first thing you probably noticed is it became a lot brighter. With this track, I didn't want to use a lot of compression. The main objective for this was just EQing out some of the muddiness in the track, brightening it up a touch. And you can also hear, as it gets brighter, you can hear the stereo width seem to change. You can hear all the left and right stuff going, panning. That's just because I've taken out a whole lot of mud, and you can actually hear those top end panning elements. So what I'm going to do now is go through each individual plugin, talk a little bit about it, do an A/B test at the biggest part of the song towards the end, and just show you exactly what each plugin's doing. Okay, so the first plugin I'm using that I would normally use in the mixing stage, but because I didn't have it when I mixed it, I decided to put it on the mastering, put it in for the mastering stage. So this is Slate Digital's virtual channel strip console. It gives you a selection of 5 different consoles that it's emulating, and I've purposely chosen the API for this one because, as you heard in the before the master version of it, it's really muddy, and API stuff's really known for really nice top end and its clarity and stuff. I do usually use the Neve, that's the Brit N, but because this track is just so muddy and the Brit N adds even more bottom end to the mix, I kind of steered away from that and chose a cleaner version. So see if you can hear it. It's really subtle. It's actually kind of hard to hear before the EQ. Once I EQ it later on in the processing chain, you'll hear this actually affecting the track a little bit more than you would by itself. But I'm going to show you an A/B without it and then with it. Cool, that's that plugin. Like I said, pretty hard to hear at this stage, but it does glue the whole thing together, and it just does something to it that I really like. Okay, let's move on to the next plugin. I'll bypass this and show you the next one. The next one is an EQ. Now, a general rule of thumb for mastering is you cut with your EQs before compression and you boost after. So as you can see, I've taken out a lot in this kind of muddy low end area. A slight roll off at the bottom because most of this information below 20 Hz is just mud anyway. It just muddies up your track. It doesn't actually add anything to it. And yes, I have boosted it a little bit. Decided to just add that in before the compression anyway, because it's not a massive boost. It's just a tiny little boost at about 8K. I'll do the same. I'll do an A/B before and after, and you can hear exactly what it's doing. Okay, you probably heard it drop dramatically in volume, mainly because I'm just cutting so much out. And one thing to note, like I said in my last video, I think it was, your perception of how something sounds musically changes with volume. So if you increase something, even just by the slightest dB, your brain automatically perceives it as having more bottom end and more top end. So in your mastering stage, you don't want to get tricked by volume differences before and after your plugins, which is why I've got the perception plugin in. I'll show you that at the very end. But basically what it does is it levels out before and after your plugins, the volume, so you can make decisions based on what your plugin's doing to the sound, not volume changes. Because you may have heard that and said, oh, it sounds worse with it. The only reason you'd probably say that is because it dropped so much in volume and you'll be like, oh, it lost its guts, it doesn't have the same energy. And that's only because of the volume difference before and after. Just thought I'd make you aware of that as I go on. Okay, because I've cut so much, I actually added a plugin to add some more gain, 4 dB of gain. I don't need to A/B that. Obviously, it's just going to be 4 dB louder. And so that's what I did there. Then we go on to compression. I decided to use a multiband compressor here, basically because there's so much mud in the song. I'm trying to get rid of it. So putting a multiband compressor actually starts compressing more the mud out of it, each band separately, really highs, top highs, kind of your muddy area, and your low end obviously. Using the C4 before the SSL compression means that this muddiness won't hit the compressor too hard. I'm trying to take out the mud before it gets to the general compressor later. So again, I'll do an A/B of before and after, and you can really hear the difference with this plugin. Okay, a little mistake there. Because I don't have my limiter on compression on, having the gain pushed it into the red at the bottom. So that's one thing you should also take note of when you're mastering. Okay, I'll do it without the gain. Here we go. Okay, you can hear that again, dropping your volume, taking out a lot of the mud, that kind of thing. From now on, I think I'll leave all the other plugins in because they kind of work off each other. So what I'll do is I'll A/B before I add the new plugin in, and it'll give you a better idea of what's actually happening. So yeah, this plugin is just taking away a little bit more of the mud in the mid-range, and then I put it into the SSL compressor. So let's just turn on. I should turn on the gain as well. I might reduce the gain so it doesn't hit the red. Okay, this is my Waves SSL compression plugin. You've probably seen it in other videos that I've used. Okay, a little talk over the settings. I have the threshold set at a amount, so it's only just moving this little needle here. I don't want to compress a lot. And in your mastering stage, you don't want to be compressing a lot. You should be compressing little bit by little bit up until your master track. So you should be compressing slightly on individual channels, and then maybe compressing in the bass area, e.g. Drums, bass, or vocal bass if you've got vocals. And then your mastering stage, you shouldn't have to compress it really hard. If you need to compress it more, it's best to use multiple compressors, not just one compressor to do all the hard, heavy lifting. So again, I'm trying not to do drastic compression, just a little bit. I've taken a little bit off with the C4, and now a tiny bit more with the SSL compressor. Okay, let's do an A/B before that and after it. Sorry about the volume difference there. I probably didn't need to take the master volume down for that, because I've obviously added the compression in to take out the volume spikes. Like you can see, it was only subtly compressing it, nothing major. And my thought behind mastering is just adding lots of small, tiny changes to make an overall better sound. So I'm not going to smash it with a compressor and EQ everything completely. It should sound pretty good before you get to the master stage anyway, except this track had a lot of mud in the EQ, so that's the most drastic thing I'm doing to this track. Okay, like I was saying before, I think I said it before anyway, you should probably cut your EQs before your compression and do your summing, or you're adding EQs after your compression. The reason why is you don't want to have those frequencies that you're cutting affect your compressor. So you want to take out, like for this track, take out the mud, so that's not affecting your compressor. And then you just add a little bit more top end after. That's what I'm doing with this. This is just my Waves API stuff. It sounds really good in the top end, which is why I use it. Only 2 dB of 5K, and I did a slight cut at 50 Hertz because it's, again, really muddy and I didn't want those frequencies in there. So again, let's do AB. I'll turn on the Slate Digital as well, so you can hear that in action. So you could probably hear it just brightening up in the top end, coming a little bit more alive. So that's what that plugin's doing there. Okay, again, I've got another gain plugin. This time I've actually reduced the gain, so it's not hitting the following plugin too hard. So this plugin, again from Slate Digital, is emulating tape machine. So again, I'm going to do an A/B without and then with. Again, this is really subtle. It's emulating tape, which in the real world it would be affecting the EQ just slightly and might be rolling off a tiny bit of top end, depending on how hard you're pushing the signal into it. Slight compression, so it's gluing the piece of music a little bit further. So in reality, all these plugins are kind of, well, this one, the Slate Digital, are all slightly compressing, slightly EQing. So as you can see, I'm kind of doing little tiny bits of compression along the way to make a bigger overall result, rather than getting one plugin to do all the compression, all the EQing, all the added distortion, musical overdrive. So that's why I'm doing it like this. Okay, here's another plugin. You've seen me use this in other videos probably, and again, this is just something subtle, but it's actually really nice. It's replicating a subtle tube preamp, so it's adding musical distortion. And again, I'll show you an A/B comparison without and then with. Great, that's that plugin. We're getting towards the end now, and most people like to put a limiter at the end. It's pretty common to do this. This is a FabFilter Pro L. Like, I really enjoy using this plugin because it's so visual. You can see exactly what it's limiting, exactly what it's affecting volume-wise, and because this piece is such an organic kind of acoustic type piece, I didn't want to limit it too hard, just take some of the top peaks off so I could bring the overall volume of the song up. So again, I'll do an A/B, and you can hear exactly what it's doing, or more so, you can see what it's doing. as you can see, it's hardly working at all. Those red little blocks at the top are showing you exactly what it's doing to the signal, just shaving off just a hair at the very top, just so I can bring up my whole track just a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is show you this perception plugin. I've just added this to my bunch of tools recently, and it's amazing. What you do is you put one of these plugins before your effects chain and then one after. Now in the real world I should have put that BCC on the mix and bounced it out when I was mixing anyway, so I'm just going to compare all these. So basically what it does is it reads the signal volume, peak to loudness ratio before all your effects, and then calculates a difference and lets you match it. So basically what it's allowing you to do is take out the volume difference before and after plugins, so you can make a better decision based on what the plugins are doing rather than based on the volume differences that they're adding or taking away from your track. So that's what this does. And you probably know that plugins also add latency, so it also has a function to sync up the before and after, basically taking away the latency. So you just got to play the track a little bit for it to analyze it, and then you can balance it, and then I'll show you before and after. And the before and after is not going to have the volume differences. It's purely going to be the plugins working as they're meant to be working. So you'll hear the EQ, you'll hear the compression, the multiband, you'll hear the subtle harmonic musical distortion that the Oxford's adding, the tape's adding, but you won't be fooled by the volume saying, oh, that sounds better because it's louder, or oh, it doesn't sound as good because it's not as loud. So this is a great plugin for mastering. I highly recommend it. So what I'll do is I'll just let it play, let it figure out the difference, balance it to balance the volume, sync it to sync, take away the latency that the plugins are doing, and then you can hear exactly what my master's doing before and after. So here we go. So pretty drastic change, as you could probably hear. The main thing is the brightness. Because I've taken out so much of the mud, the brightness has really come back into the track. There's only subtle compression, but like I said before, the main thing I was trying to do with this track is get rid of the mud. Another quick tip for mastering, a good idea is to actually walk away from your master and either come back the next day or with fresh airs, because a lot of the times your ears will get tired when you're mixing. You've heard the song like 1,000 times just looped in a specific section, and it's really good idea to actually walk away or come back to it the next day. So I might even listen to this tomorrow and go, oh, it's actually got a little bit too much top end, I might just back off that a little bit. But yeah, that's basically my thought process for mastering. I hope you picked up some tips. Let me know if you've got any tips. I'm always willing to learn how I can make things better. And yeah, until next time, see ya.